Final thought. Any regrets about anything that went on in the pre-fights and all the news conferences?
Negative. I'm good. I beat Polly. I left with his belt and his girl.
Adrian, congratulations on winning the title. Polly, come on in.
Pussy, dog. Don't stop.
Hey, I'm just saying, you lost.
I know I lost. But
Hold on, wait.
Don't brag about taking my side piece. Don't brag about taking my side piece, though. That's my side piece. You don't get laid.
All right.
Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. I'm Alex.
I'm Julio, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. Help promote the algorithm and spread the word.
You can also find us on SoundCloud to subscribe and review, and don't forget to visit our main website, wearethecontrarians.com.
Follow us on Twitter at Contrarian Prime, and to like us on Facebook, visit facebook.com/Contrarian Prime.
And if you have the willpower to keep up with our pretentious ramblings, you can follow us individually at Contrarian Alex for myself and at Ovnio for Julio. That's OVNIO.
Now, time for the podcast. And I'm recording for Contrarians Corner.
Grudge Match Day.
T2 Grudge Match Day.
Hello, and welcome back to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. Oh, I guess welcome for our new listeners, but I assume we'll be bringing in a bevy of new listeners as we tackle this 2013 Christmas Day masterpiece. Julio, we have been on a stretch here with Sylvester Stallone for our patrons with the King of Comedy episode with Bobby De Niro. Both men, no strangers to the Contrarians, but today we bring them together. And no, it's not Copland. It's for a rematch that was 30 years in the making.
Man, I didn't even remember that. This is not the first De Niro-Stallone collaboration.
No, and hopefully it's not the last.
They need to close the trilogy. They've been cops together. They've been boxers together. They need to be criminals together in the next one.
Yeah, like bank robbers or some shit. Or just like in a Guy Ritchie movie. They're, I don't know, looking for a diamond of some sort.
The next Scorsese movie.
Yes. Well, the main thing is Stallone has to be the hero somehow is what we got to figure out. That's where we got to get to. But, Julio, we are here today to discuss 2013's American sports comedy film directed by Peter Siegel, Grudge Match, starring Sylvester Stallone, Robert De Niro, Kevin Hart, Alan Arkin, Kim Basinger to a lesser extent, and John Bernthal. Now, he is of, correct me if I'm wrong, Walking Dead fame.
Yes, I was going to ask you, where do you know John Bernthal from? Because I know him mainly from Walking Dead, but honestly, I think that now, over the world, he's known as the Punisher. Because he was the Punisher on the Netflix show, which I haven't seen yet.
I did not know that, but just his face and like the structure of his jaw, that all makes a lot of sense.
He looks like the Punisher.
All I know about him is Walking Dead and also his Wikipedia page, the picture of him. He's wearing a Gennady Golovkin hat, Triple G, who's my favorite boxer. So he's already, in my good graces. And it ties it all together with the whole boxing motif.
This is him young, at least. I mean, not that he's aged much, like physically, but I think personality-wise, attitude-wise, he just sounds so just innocent and youthful in this movie. Compared to I know him before this movie. I just knew him for playing assholes.
Oh, and this, yeah, he definitely is the sympathetic character. He is Robert De Niro's son, and I mean, if the horrifying CGI surrounding a lot of Robert De Niro in this movie really turns you off, then the love and the tugging of the heartstrings of the story with his son will definitely bring you back in.
Well, I mean, I've seen The Irishman, so I've seen the worst that CGI can throw at De Niro, and I've survived. So
you'd be surprised. Okay. Have you seen the poster for Grudge Match? Trust me, Julio, we'll get to that discussion in the second half, as the marketing material for this movie resulted in a lot of confused head scratches from me. If this is your first time listening to the Contrarians, thank you very much for tuning in. If you're a returning listener, give Julio and myself a moment here while we explain what we do to the new listeners out there. Here on the Contrarians, we like to rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine, as we say. We'll find a movie on Rotten Tomatoes that is highly rated, one of those shiny red tomatoes, a lot of times known as certified fresh, that stamp of approval, and cut it down to size, point out some of the errors, issues, foibles with the film, and maybe why it's a bit overrated. Conversely, we'll find a movie that is rotten, one of those nasty green splotches. We shoot around the 30% and below mark, and we will make a case for the film's positive merit. Grudge Match clocking in at 31% on Rotten Tomatoes. So in the first half of this podcast, known as Contrarians Corner, we will be giving it the contrarian treatment. Julio, if listeners want to know how we really feel about the movie in question, they just have to hang around for the second half.
That's correct. In the second half, aptly titled Real Talk, this is where we tell you how we really feel, and we tell each other how we really feel. Because in movies like this one, where we haven't really spoken much about them before, we have no idea. I know you brought this up before, Alex. I knew you'd seen it, but I don't remember if you like it. And obviously, this was my first time watching it, so you have no idea, because I've been very careful about not letting... I haven't given you any clues, any hints on my texts. I think the only thing I told you was that it was pretty inspirational how these old men got in shape. It really made me feel like a slacker, but it also gave me some hope that I, too, can win a grudge match in the near future.
To be fair, I didn't remember if I liked it coming into this rewatch. So
that's the best.
It was all fair game. Yeah, we've talked about Sly before and the fountain of youth that he's gone to, the Randy the Ram school of the needle in the ass principle. But with Robert De Niro, I'm there with you, man. Watching 70-year-old Bob just, get in probably as good a shape as he could for this, it was quite inspirational. And the whole concept of this podcast right now is very timely with the, I don't know if I want to call it controversy, but have you been keeping up with the whole thing about Citizen Kane's ranking on Rotten Tomato, Julio?
Yes, somebody at work mentioned that it had dropped to 99%.
Yes, and an amazing... I posted about it on Twitter. It was basically people playing into... Or not playing into, it was people pointing out what we've said from the beginning, and it's that people don't understand how Rotten Tomatoes works. Because, the narrative was... Rotten Tomatoes went and dug up an old review of Citizen Kane that said it wasn't good just so they could knock down its rating from 100%. And if you know how it works, that's not what happened. The Chicago Tribune, just from their profile, posted an old negative review for it. So yeah, it affected its rating. And I guess people were saying now Paddleton, or not Paddleton. What's the bear movie?
Paddington.
No, yeah.
The Peruvian bear.
Paddleton is a very good movie with Mark Duplass and Ray Romano.
But no bears and no Peruvians.
Paddington is a CGI bear. People were saying, I guess, that it is now the highest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes, which I know there's a bunch of movies that are 100%, but I guess what that means is it has the most reviews backing it.
Yeah. Well, I get good news for everybody that loves Citizen Kane. It's still the same movie.
It does not affect your ability to enjoy it one way or the other.
Yeah, you're beyond. If you already watched Citizen Kane and you liked it, you are beyond anything that Rotten Tomatoes can offer to you. You already decided it's good. It's fresh in your heart.
That's right. And that's why we're here to talk about, you can love the movies that you want to love, even if Rotten Tomatoes says you can't. And you can also say movies like American Hustle fucking suck, even despite the fact that they have a very high rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I really thought you were going to go with, and I have news for all you Citizen Kane fans. It does suck.
I mean, if I was a Rotten Tomatoes qualified critic, my review would probably be a green splotch.
Damn.
A very respectful green splotch, but it would be a green splotch nonetheless.
Back to the lecture at hand. Here today, Grudge Match. As May has sprung, it's a beautiful day here in Austin, Texas, but for the purposes of this movie, we're going to Christmas time, baby. The release date of December 25th, 2013, but also the movie, one thing I did forget, is it is based around Christmas time. There's Christmas lights and Christmas trees. I think even Christmas carols play at some point in the city.
Not a white Christmas, though. That's,
no.
I think, what threw me off.
Yeah, I mean, it's Pittsburgh. It's just really sloshy and gross. which I think is an unfair portrayal of Pittsburgh. I've been there once in my life, and it's a beautiful city. As I mentioned, directed by Peter Siegel. Have we discussed Mr. Siegel on the Contrarians before? Via osmosis we did, because he directed Tommy Boy, so that would have had to have come up during our Black Sheep episode. Also, Anger Management. Anger Management with Adam Sandler and Jack Nicholson, which I have never seen. 50 First Dates, nope. Longest Yard. Get Smart. Did you like Get Smart? I really did.
Nah, I'm kind of like mixed on it. If I was a Rotten Tomatoes critic, it would be a very respectful green splotch. It's on the level of Citizen Kane.
It would be a tomato that is past expiration but still edible.
You're not going to get sick, but your friends are not going to look at you.
It's not aesthetically pleasing. Yeah, I guess just put two and two together with that the connection with Alan Arkin here as he returned for Grudge Match. Written by Tim Kelleher and Rodney Rothman. Aaron Sorkin, they are not in their filmography. It looks like the Rodney Rothman character, though, you would be familiar with, Julio, as he wrote and directed Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
What? Which, I mean, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but that's our next episode, Alex.
That's, man, we couldn't have... this is not intentional, listeners. We intentionally planned this to wrap up a little trifecta of De Niro and Stallone, but did not expect the connective thread to be there. But in addition to that, just Grudge Match and 22 Jump Street are his other writing credentials. Looks like he was a writer on Undeclared, which you know how much I fucking love that show. So
he refuses to be pinned down.
And the Tim Kelleher gentleman, I'm looking up here to see what his writing credentials are.
It's all DC stuff.
Yeah, it doesn't look like he has too much in the way of writing experience. Wouldn't know it by watching Grudge Match, though. Julio, this box office disaster, unfortunately so, Grudge Match, did come out to a pretty mild response and reception. What were critics saying about this?
So we got 3 quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website, 3 rotten quotes. But let's start with Richard Krause from Richard Krause. That's the name of his website. He says, will likely appeal to an older audience who can really get behind the idea of 2 old-timers stepping up and reliving past glories. I feel personally attacked. How young is this fucker?
19.
Richard Krause Jr. Listen, Junior, you will be old someday. And who knows who are you going to be rooting for in whatever movie about old men getting a second chance they make, in the future. I don't know how old he is, but, let's say if he's still alive by 2060, I would like to see what movie really gets Richard Krause pumped up.
Whatever Marvel movie comes out.
Yes. Chris Evans coming back as Captain America one last time. Matt Brunson from Film Frenzy says, Muhammad Ali may have had the ability to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, but 2013's Grudge Match can do no more than stumble around like a cockroach that's taking a direct hit from a can of Raid.
Why did they feel the need to bring Ali into it? I guess just because the day they wrote that review, they learned who Muhammad Ali was in one of his expressions or sayings, his catchphrases.
As preparation for Grudge Match, they watch Ali, Michael Mann's Ali. They listen to your review on After Hours, and they're like, that sounds like a good movie.
Yes, it was almost an hour longer than Grudge Match, but they both felt of the same length.
And finally, Richard Probst from the independentcritic.com says, really? Did this actually look good on paper? Or was the money just so awesome that it was impossible to pass up? And I would say, if nothing else, of course this looks great on paper. If you come to me and you say, hey, Rocky versus Raging Bull, no recasting, we got the original actors. I'm like, sure, do it.
Yeah, and on top of that, the looking good on paper, I mean, Peter Siegel, excuse me, not the brother of Steven. Peter Siegel's previous movie made almost $250 million, and he has a history of, crowd-pleasing movies. On top of that, you've got 2013 Kevin Hart, right, at the peak of his, or close to the peak of his popularity.
The upsides, Kevin Hart.
You got the Academy Award winner Alan Arkin. I mean, yes, of course this looked good on paper. And the previous Rocky movie that they made a killing. So, yes, it did look good on paper. And no, I don't think the money was outrageous because this had a fairly modest budget of $40 million. I say modest in the sense of who's involved.
They did it for the love of the game, the love of the sport.
That's right. It's all about the love of the game. With the box office return being a very disappointing $45 million, roughly. And we'll get to it in the second half if the timing of it was to blame or just we now live in a world where there's no longer black and white but just shades of gray and people don't want to see shit like this. So Grudge Match begins, as all sports movies should, with Jim Lampley, one of the all-time great boxing commentators and just generally lovable man. Julio, the guy who opens this, is a real boxing commentator, and as I'm sure you put together by the end of it, the commentary team for the actual fight was the actual HBO boxing commentary team.
Well, I didn't know it was HBO, but yeah. I figured. Joe Rogan was not there, so that confused me a little bit. But
Here Comes the Boom, this was not. Lampley, though, no stranger to the silver screen, had a role in Blades of Glory, and Jim doesn't get his props for his... he's such a good straight man that like some of his lines that he drops are very funny, more so than they would be if you gave it like a Sam Kinison type delivery. So here in the beginning, when he's basically giving us the backstory to the rivalry between Henry Razor Sharp, Sly, and Billy the Kid McDonough, which is Bobby De Niro, talk about their first two fights. He says, some rivalries are... I can't remember the exact expression he uses, but they're forever, they're eternal. And he references Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan, which really made me laugh. And then explains that the Kid and Razor had two fights previously, 30 years prior to where the movie is set. In the first, Robert De Niro won, I believe by decision, and then the second, Razor quickly dispatched him. I think they said like a fourth round knockout. And the third fight was announced in 2B when Razor, without explanation, announced his retirement and, withdrew from the game, which, of course, led to Robert De Niro, Billy the Kid McDonough, being very... he held a grudge, if I could use a poor pun, because he missed out on the redemption of the fight, but also the big payday. And it had been 30 years since, and the fire still clearly burned in each of them, despite them saying, it's... nothing I'm worried about now. Julio kind of sprinkles of real boxing elements to this. Obviously, the idea of the rubber match, but I'm sure there's other examples of it. But to me, one of the biggest ones in 2003, I believe, Lennox Lewis, who was the heavyweight champion of the world, had a fight with Vitaly Klitschko that was a pretty controversial fight, and that Lewis was kind of getting his ass kicked, and then Vitaly got cut really bad, and they had to stop the fight due to the intensity of his cut, and so they announced the rematch, and then in the build to it, Lennox Lewis just said, "No, I'm retiring. I'm pulling out of this." So very similar to this. The difference being Lennox Lewis didn't have the balls of a Robert De Niro or Sylvester Stallone, as he never actually came back to fight years later.
He didn't have a Kim Basinger or an Alan Arkin on his side to really inspire him. I guess actually he didn't have a Kevin Hart just orchestrating the whole thing.
No, I'm sure he had plenty of sleazy promoters that tried to make it happen, but none of them had the infectious charm of Kevin Hart. Now,
I was about to say, don't you call Kevin Hart sleazy?
Oh, no, never.
He's the heart of the movie.
In the beginning here, though, when Jim is recapping these fights, I mean, Julio, they speak of the uncanny valley, and they have these fights between what are supposed to be, retroactively young Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro, to the point where it almost looks like a video game, like a demo that you would see at like E3 or something. Now, CGI and Robert De Niro are not things that you think about. They're not synonymous with one another. And coming into this, you are going to be satiated and you're going to have your fill for life with CGI and Robert De Niro. Now, is that good or bad? I mean, that's in the eye of the beholder. But what I can say is this movie, and the courage of De Niro to actually go along with this and the CGI aspect of it, it definitely makes this movie memorable.
Yeah, well, I think that there's obviously this movie is from 8 years ago, and in the years since, the technology has gotten better. So it is actually, I put it on the positive side with the context of the year 2021 to say that the CGI, the rejuvenated Robert De Niro in this movie looks better than the young Robert De Niro in The Irishman. That, so that should tell you who put more effort in their special effects. Seagal or Scorsese.
By the end of this, the true grudge match is going to be Peter Segal and Martin Scorsese, and just us comparing and contrasting who got the most out of De Niro in the boxing realm.
Yeah, and Sly, I mean, I don't know, he's never aged really on the outside. So to me, it was just like, oh, this is just another variation of what he looks like when he's young.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. The complexity and wow factor of CGI Robert De Niro, it's not lost on me, the simplicity of the title. Did you see it looks like they just used Times New Roman and just typed up Grudge Match and then superimposed it on the screen. You know, typically in something like this, you would think of the smash cut to a black screen with like big red letters that say Grudge Match. But no, it's just overlaid. I think it's where they show Sylvester Stallone's home is, under a bridge in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it was a cost-cutting measure that they had to put a very simplistic title card in there, but I appreciated that it didn't steal away from the scene.
Well, yeah, because especially it comes in late. You get no opening credits at all. It's just your guy giving us the history lesson on Stallone and De Niro. So after that, kind of like to add flashy opening credits would be a little too much. So I'm glad that they just got on with the story. So I don't remember, who do we see first? Do we see modern day De Niro or do we see modern day Sly?
I'm fairly positive we see De Niro first because he's watching the Jim Lampley special at his bar that he runs.
You're right.
Which is called like Knockout or something like that. But it's the tale of two Rockies. We have the kid who runs his restaurant / bar where he tells his stories and does his shtick, and then we have Razor, who is just a real blue collar. He's working construction in a shipyard, or just on a dock somewhere. I guess he's never really, putting the metal to the pavement, so I don't really know what he's doing there. But he wears a hard hat. I get that much.
He's there to inspire everybody. He seems to be pretty popular with the coworkers over there.
Oh yeah, I mean both of them get the aged boxer treatment, the Chuck Wepner treatment of everywhere they go, hey champ, and then people square up and do like they feign the shadow boxing with them and whatnot.
But De Niro's kind of like spread out because he has his bar, and but he also sells cars, right? He has a dealership.
Yeah. So De Niro's much better off in the terms of like the cash flow. And that's what it comes down to essentially. The beginning of the whole thing is Sly needs the money, De Niro needs the redemption. That's the story there. Obviously, De Niro was smarter with his money along the way, and Stallone. I mean, it's the story of Rocky. He somehow lost it all and is down on his luck. I think he used the same home in this that he did in Rocky Balboa.
De Niro has enough money that he can also moonlight as a stand-up comedian. He's a ventriloquist. Yes, he's got his little puppet that he talks to. It's ridiculous. And what we learn, though, is as much as Razor would like the cash and the kid would like his redemption, the ability to sleep at night, it's more that the people of Pittsburgh are just obsessed with this third fight. It's all they can talk about when they see these people. You would think after 30 years the talks would dissipate and that it would become just kind of just hypothetical, For example, in the MMA realm, it was Khabib Nurmagomedov and Tony Ferguson. It just got to the point, after about 3 years, we just all had to accept, look, it's not going to happen. The people of Pittsburgh, their will is much stronger than the MMA community, because it's 30 years later, and they still are thirsty for this fight. They're still #give us the grudge match.
Yes. I just imagine the letters to the editor in like the 90s before, the internet was really prevalent of just, I think this fight should happen, and here's why.
I deserve this fight because I sat through the first two fights.
Dear President Clinton, this is why you should make this happen. So we set the table here, and I mentioned that Razor needs the money, and a big part of that is because of the declining health of his former trainer, right?
That's what it sounded like. Good.
Lightning Conlon?
McQueen.
Alan Arkin. When I was done with the movie, when I was recounting the plot to my dad, I kept saying Alan Arkin was Sylvester Stallone's dad in this because it really just seems like he's the father figure. They didn't have to church it up and make some story. He can just be his dad. It's fine. His health is declining. He needs money to help out his friend, his confidant, his father figure. He's in a retirement home, and Julio, this is a star-studded event We get a goddamn cameo from Anthony Anderson here in the the first 15 minutes of the movie.
This is after The Departed. He already been in the big leagues. He didn't need to lower himself to a comedy, but I guess he was like, hey, anything that gets me in the room with De Niro. And then, of course, the joke is that he doesn't get a scene with De Niro.
Well, I think it was also just a way for Siegel to stick it to Scorsese. Hey, I got your boy here. I'm just using him for a cameo where he's going to give Alan Arkin a sponge bath. Very strange. That is one thing I remember from my first viewing. I did not retain that Anthony Anderson was in it. And my notes say Anthony Anderson, and I yelled at the screen, is that Anthony Anderson? Because an actor of that level, especially at that point in time, you would have thought he'd been a reoccurring character, but just big dick energy from Peter Siegel here, just saying, look what we got here just for cameos.
They were shooting Blackish on the lot next door. He just kind of stopped to take Arkin out to lunch. And they're like, hey, do you want to play this part?
My notes say here, De Niro, Stallone, Grudge Match, Arkin, Stallone, Dream Match. We might as well just go ahead and address it here. Alan Arkin in this movie, I don't know, are you going to disagree that he's the MVP?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I love him, but the MVP for me is somebody who we mentioned, but he hasn't showed up on the recap yet, and that is one Kevin Hart.
Okay, well that's fair, because then we both can agree, because their scenes together are probably the highlight of the movie. Yep. When they go back and forth. But we talked about before we started recording here, Alan Arkin, Peter Siegel basically just said, hey, I watched Little Miss Sunshine, just do that for me. Just don't swear as much. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that character, the grandpa character from Little Miss Sunshine, I mean, it won the goddamn Academy Award. Of course people want to see soon. Of course people want to see more of it. So, Julio, I assume I'm fair in saying that neither of us had an issue with Arkin just extending the role of Edwin Hoover in this.
No, just bring it. Make a franchise out of it. Grudge Match 2, as long as Arkin comes back, I don't care if anybody else does. Oh, well, Kevin Hart would be nice, but I understand. He's bigger than that now. My only disappointment was that we never got Arkin kind of giving Sly a pep talk where he's like, fuck women. Fuck a lot of women. Fuck men, too.
Yeah, just like when Kim Basinger leaves the room. Hit it and quit it. Kevin Hart, Julio's MVP, as we mentioned, shows up. He plays the role of Dante Slate Jr. Apparently, Slate, his father, was a boxer in a previous life that both Kid and Razor were familiar with. He's here, right away to bring the laughs. He's driving a jalopy around and just is Kevin Hart is turned up to the 10 in this. He is here to approach Stallone initially. I forgot completely that the basically genesis of the fight being made was them making a new version of Fight Night that they needed mocap done for. Mm-hmm. So he approaches Stallone and he says, hey, they're doing this video game. I remember the big one was Fight Night Round 4 was the one that had Ali versus Tyson on the cover. So it was like you could create this historic matchup. And so Kevin Hart, Dante pitches to him, hey, we want you for this video game. You just got to come in and throw some punches. And he says, like, make a few noises. Yeah, I'm going to kill you. But in a white guy's voice, because I don't want to scare people. I mean, Kevin Hart's here to bring the laughs right away.
He's not here to surprise you by playing a different type of character. This is not The Upside, which I referenced earlier. This is just Kevin Hart being Kevin Hart, and bless his Kevin Hartness.
So he says $15,000. I'll pay you $15,000 to come do this shot. So we get a recreation of the motion capture scene from Holy Motors with Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone. They show up on set, and they're in the green suits, and they have all the motion capture balls on. And I did remember watching this. This was like a heavy part of the trailer, and I guess there are some really funny moments in this movie and good lines and quippy dialogue. Would you say this is the comedy set piece of the movie, though?
It's probably the broadest that the comedy gets. Well, maybe tied up with De Niro having sex in a car with the kid in the front seat. But
oh God, that kid.
But yeah, I would say definitely this is the biggest, like the highest profile set piece. I don't think this is what made me laugh the hardest.
No, yeah, definitely not me either. But this was, I think, mass appeal wise, just seeing Stallone. This would have been like the popcorn scene where people are laughing and choking on their popcorn, the general movie-going audience, because, you got Stallone and Robert De Niro, two old men, two seniors at this point in these motion capture suits, and then they get into a little bit of a scuffle and are throwing TVs at each other and whatnot. That's what happens. They get in each other's face at this motion capture segment. They didn't think either was going to be there. It leads to them getting into a bit of a brawl. It's 2013. We all had smartphones at this point. So what happens? Someone pulls out their phone and films it, and it goes viral. So now the demand for the fight has gone outside of the Pittsburgh city limits. There are people in different parts of the country that want to see this. So they get arrested because of this, because they obviously caused property damage. We get some insanely questionable dialogue while they're in prison. De Niro's just running his mouth, and then Stallone says, well, won't you guys rape him already? Again, we talk about things that don't age well. This movie is not Wizard of Oz. It wasn't made in the 30s, and it was made in the past decade. It seems like even at that point in time, someone could have been like, church that up a little bit. But
unlike De Niro and Stallone, that line didn't age well.
But Julio, I was not anywhere near as concerned with that as I was with how long they were in jail. Because when they come out, the thing has gone viral already, and it's been reported on the news, and like ESPN has featured it on SportsCenter on their top 10. So we're talking at least multiple days being held in this drunk tank. They're not in
still
prison.
Wearing the green suit.
Yeah, they're still in the mocap suits. You would think EA or whoever was making the game would say, that's our property, give that shit back. But they're just hanging out, in the drunk tank for 4 or 5 days. It's an indictment on the American legal system. It was just very concerning.
Yeah, well, much like the rest of the movie, though, it's an indictment also in how we treat our elders. I mean, this entire movie is about how they go from being laughed at and from not being taken seriously to finally regaining the respect from, not just from the public, but also respect from each other.
Upon their release, though, Dante's waiting for him, and he's like, you guys have been in there for 2 weeks. We got a new president. He talks about, since you've been in the clink, this thing went viral, and there's this demand to see the fight, and I want to make this happen with y'all. Of course, Stallone is adamant, no, I'm not going to do it. And De Niro wants, fuck yeah, let's fight. This is where we learn why I should say Stallone backed out all those years ago, and why he has no interest in being around Bobby De Niro, and why he has no interest in fighting or doing really anything that would necessitate cohesion with the kid McDonough. And Robert De Niro explains it only as Robert De Niro can. I banged his girlfriend is the explanation we're given. Instead, Julio, of piecing this together along the way as the movie does, I figure we'll just go ahead and give the exposition of what happened here. Kim Basinger, who shows up in our next scene, was Razor, Stallone's girlfriend. Not side piece, yep. I think a full-time girlfriend.
Official.
And yeah, their Facebook status on Facebook read in a relationship.
Yeah.
And she became disenchanted by, him always being in the limelight and not having time for her. So she went and cheated on him with his rival, the kid.
Yeah, she wanted to hurt him. Oh, because she thought that he was cheating on her.
That's right.
And so then she had revenge sex with De Niro. And De Niro was like, sure, why not? You're Kim Basinger.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the time frame there, that would have been like close to original Batman Kim Basinger, and hell yeah. Sorry, Julio, I know we're brothers in podcasting, but if that was the same situation with you and I'm going to sleep with Kim Basinger. Sorry.
I would tip my hat and I would say, I understand, sir. This was my fault. We were Facebook official and I fucked it up.
But if you can believe it, the one-time session between the two of them leads to the creation of a child. The aforementioned John Bernthal, who plays BJ in this movie. And so Basinger and De Niro have a kid together. Now, I don't know if Stallone knew that part up until where this movie takes place.
Oh, he has to have known. Otherwise, he's way too cool about, the whole thing. Because they meet.
Yeah.
And they
that's
never
right.
have like a...
Oh, yeah, they have like the Pacino and, for lack of context, or better example, Pacino and De Niro scene where they meet in the house at like Christmas time and, hey, he's a good kid. They create John Bernthal, who then has a child of his own. I don't know this kid's name. I don't know whose kid he is, but what his family had on the studio that made this movie. What was this? Warner Brothers? This kid, the grandchild of De Niro in this movie makes Jake Lloyd look like fucking Daniel Day-Lewis. That's kind of why I wanted to get this out of the way early. One of the few scuffs on the boot that is this movie is definitely the kid who plays De Niro's grandson.
One element that we cannot spin into something positive.
We have now created the family tree, so we don't have to do that along the way. Back to the original point, the whole reason that Stallone wants nothing to do with De Niro is because of the infidelity, and in many ways felt it derailed his life and took away the love of his life, Sally. Again, Kim Basinger.
Well, not just that. This is such a bullshit speech from Stallone. I don't remember if he's telling Arkin or he's telling Kim Basinger at some point in the movie, but it's not just that De Niro took Kim Basinger from him, he also took boxing from him.
Much worse.
Even though Stallone is the one who decided to retire, but he's putting that on De Niro as well.
So Julio, Stallone eventually has no choice but to take this fight. He wants to help out Alan Arkin, right? That's the reason he takes it.
Yeah, because Alan Arkin, he's too much of a handful, too much of a pain in the ass, so he gets kicked out of the home where they were taking care of him.
Yes, because he moves in with Stallone under the bridge where they live.
Right, and he's like, "You don't even have a TV? What the fuck?"
He said, one of the lines of dialogue I wrote down because it did make me laugh is Alan Arkin asks him, "Do you have an iPad?" And Stallone goes, "No, it's a regular couch." God bless. You flip, the cliches, you turn them on their head where the old guy is the technologically savvy one. Well, I mean, I guess they're both old. The older guy.
The old guy with an Oscar.
Yes. He should have just had that in his suitcase everywhere he went. You see this shit? Stallone acquiesces and agrees to fight Billy, the Kid McDonough, in a fight billed as Grudge Match, which is awesome, and I'm kind of shocked hasn't been the title of a really high-profile fight over the last 40 years. The initial press conference is held. They kind of, I don't want to say rip off, but they do a nod to The Simpsons here. I believe it's The Simpsons where Homer goes into space. They do the press conference. The first question is this a joke? And the guy mediating it's like, "No, next question." The second reporter goes, "No, seriously, is this a joke?" And it seems like that's kind of the feel that we get from the very meandering members of the press that are there. They get in all their ribs about being old and have fallen, he can't get up, that type of thing. And Stallone just reassures them, I'm going to be in shape and then we'll see what happens. But
I think that Kevin Hart is the one that really saves the day here, though. And I just, as I was replaying the scene in my mind, I just realized that that's really why I like his character so much. He's funny, like we've established, like everybody knows. Kevin Hart is funny. But also just the fact that he is good at his job. It's just that he hasn't had the means, like the resources to be as good as, he would like to be. But now he's being handed this opportunity and he's doing the best he can with it. And so when the press conference starts turning and nobody seems to be as excited as he wanted them to be, he actually gives a pretty good speech. And then he's like, "And now drop the mic, get the hell out of here. We're not going to take any more follow-up questions." I thought that was pretty cool. I think that's why I like his character so much, because he's not an idiot. It's not that, he lucked out into this. Yes.
So we got to promote the fight, despite, Stallone just kind of wanting to get paid. He doesn't really want to do his work to do it, which is an all too common issue with fighters nowadays. I mentioned Khabib Nurmagomedov earlier, who was the UFC lightweight champion for some time. Dude never really seemed to have an interest in promoting fights, so it would take like a Conor McGregor or someone of eclipse like a draw to really help him out there. So fortunately, we have kind of a Conor McGregor in the form of Robert De Niro in this. So he's doing his part on it. And then we have the promoter, Dante, who's like, "Well, we still got to get out and promote it more." He even does the gimmick where has the crop duster flying with the flag behind it, Grudge Match, whatever the date is.
But this is okay. So then what's going on at the same time is when they go get their physical, because my note says Stallone recreating the prostate check from Road Trip.
Oh, God, I forgot. Any movie with old dudes doing something athletic, you're going to have some scene of a prostate exam. And with this, it's, to a comically gratuitous extent with the doctor that puts like a gallon of lube on his index and middle finger. And then Stallone, he almost does the Sean William Scott sell upon insertion. He just and like pounds his fist on the desk or the table. It's absurd.
See, it took several years, but he eventually developed the comedic chops that he didn't have in Tango and Cash.
We got to assemble our training camps. As we mentioned, Razor Sharp will be training with Alan Arkin, his former coach, and they very, very old school, bare bones approach, flipping tires, pulling trucks. It's a big strength and conditioning thing. We get the wink and the nod at Rocky when they go into the freezer at the local supermarket, and Stallone goes to wind up and punch the beef carcasses, and he goes, "What the hell are you doing? That's not sanitary. We're just here to get some steaks." And again, a big part of the selling of that is how great Alan Arkin is.
Yeah, I applaud Peter Segal's. He wasn't afraid of going there. Because you would think that maybe putting yourself in the company, I mean, you already have the comparison to Rocky and Raging Bull just because of who you cast. To actually go there and kind of sort of mock Rocky, I mean, that's dangerous, but he pulls it off.
On the other side of the coin, in a bit of a publicity stunt, the kid, Robert De Niro, is going to train with gym owner Frankie Bright, played by LL Cool J.
Always a delight when he stops by.
When he enters the fray. Again, it's really just Frankie's mocking the idea of the fight and not going to offer much assistance. Again, it's just for like publicity that he is putting on this front that he's going to be training Billy. He turns him over to his coach. Is going to be Mikey, played by none other than Joey Coco Diaz. Are you familiar too much with Joey Diaz besides the guy in Spider-Man that says, if you want to get him, you got to get through me?
No. I didn't even recognize him from that.
Joey Diaz is amazing, in a word. He's a stand-up comedian. He's a regular on Joe Rogan's podcast. He has a podcast of his own. He's been on Tom Segura's podcast. He's just a really interesting fellow, a Cuban gentleman who grew up in America. Has amazing stories, and none of which are very appropriate or things that you should play around your significant other or family members. But Coco, Mikey is his character's name, is not much of a trainer. He just sits there, and the joke is, he's telling Robert De Niro he's fat while clearly Joey Diaz is big. He's lost a lot of weight since then, though, so good on him. And
he watched Grudge Match, and I was like, well, fuck. They can do it.
He's just constantly giving him bad advice, and there's the one scene where like De Niro doesn't listen to him. He listens to BJ, his son, instead. And all this transitions. We get the comedic relief of Joey Diaz, but it's basically just a means to an end to where Billy the Kid's corner is going to be his son. He's going to be the one training him and helping him get ready.
So this is really, I said that Kevin Hart was the heart of the movie, but really, no. This is like I don't know, which animal has multiple hearts? Is it the cow? No, that's multiple stomachs. Well, whatever animal has multiple hearts, that's this movie. Because you have, the Kevin Hart trying to...
Octopus has multiple hearts.
There you go. You have the story of Kevin Hart who's trying to redeem his family name because his father was known for having like ripped off a bunch of people, and now he's, trying to make good and be successful as a promoter. And then you have the love story between Stallone and Kim Basinger, who, she seeks him out. She's trying to rekindle that relationship. And then you have what's the most effective to me, which was the story between De Niro and the Punisher, where John Bernthal seeks him out, just sneaks up on De Niro at the gym, and De Niro says, "Okay, well, let's go have some coffee or something," and they have a good talk, or well, good in quotation marks, where De Niro just gives him his side of the story and tells him, "Yeah, well, your mom asked me to stay away, so I stayed away." I mean, we're talking about how John Bernthal is very different here than in all the other roles that we know him from, and from the beginning, I mean, he looks like a little kid that's just hurt that he finally found his long-lost father, and it's not what he was hoping for. So that, to me, that drives the movie. And I don't know how you were feeling at this point, Alex, like if you had a preference as far as who you were rooting for in this grudge match to come. But to me, the relationship between John Bernthal and Robert De Niro was what really ultimately put me on De Niro's side in this confrontation, in this fight. Was it the same for you?
Yeah, it's definitely a movie. It's poised like Rocky, where Stallone is obviously the working man hero, and the come from behind story is what you want to see. But I really felt for Billy the Kid. He had been living obviously with the the desire to get this win back for years and years. So, yeah, I was with you. I really was pulling for Billy the Kid towards the end. We kind of already laid out the exposition, but this is where Kim Basinger really becomes a full-fledged member of the cast and shows up. And she is trying to win Razor Sharp back into her life, but obviously there's still that giant elephant in the room of... He even says at one point, it could have been anybody, but you had to pick him. The relationship between De Niro and his son is building, and kind of running parallel to that is the trust that's building back up between Sally and Sharp.
She should have just replied, "Whoa, I could have done Arkin. That would have hurt more."
The training intensifies. Both men are kicking it up a notch. They're intensifying, their strength and conditioning, also the sparring. The shit that Alan Arkin's making Razor Sharp do, and just naming. There's the one I wrote down. He's doing the water punching with the dumbbells underwater. He's like, "This is how Joe Frazier won the title," and Stallone just goes, "Joe Frazier never did this." I thought that was really funny. In the training camp of De Niro, known kleptomaniac Sam Hoger is in the background. He's a former MMA fighter who was on the first season of The Ultimate Fighter and got caught stealing everyone's shit on that show. So it was very strange to just kind of see him, because he's not really of any boxing notoriety, and he's just kind of there sparring with LL Cool J. I know this means nothing to you, Julio, but I laughed out loud when I saw that it was Sam Hoger.
By now, De Niro is officially being trained by his son.
Yeah.
And he's officially met his grandson, the highlight of the movie.
Woof. Yeah, what's the kid's name? Trey?
Trey.
Yeah. They end up having a family dinner together, and that's where my note says, "Whose kid is this?" Because there's a point where Kim Basinger's like, "Here's a quarter. Why don't you go play a video game?" He's like, "This is the best family dinner ever," or something. And it's we've talked about on here repeatedly. Don't mean to harp on child actors, because it's in a lot of cases something they didn't really ask for. But in this particular case, if we're going to give a fair assessment of the movie, we can't act like this kid was Drew Barrymore in E.T. or anything like that.
Yeah, I would never say it's the kid's fault. I would just say that it's whoever insisted that line had to stay there, that's their fault. You could cut that out and tell the kid, "Hey, and this one you just sit there and you just be quiet."
Oh, here we go. So to promote the fight, there's this cross-promotional event with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC, where Billy the Kid and Razor Sharp go to promote their fight. They show a shot of you know me, I had to rewind it to see what the actual fight was, because they show the ending sequence of an actual fight. It was Bigfoot Silva when he knocked out Alistair Overeem. That would have been 2011, 2012 maybe. So they show up to this event, and this is not uncommon, or wasn't uncommon back in the day of the Zuffa days of the UFC, when there was a movie or a fight or something like that coming up that kind of went outside the realms of the UFC. There would be people there to promote it. I do not know what the UFC or the sport of mixed martial arts in general got out of this. It seems like they were just like, "Hey, they want Stallone and De Niro to come do something at our show." Okay, because basically what happens is they go out there, and I laughed so fucking hard when it shows them before they walk out to do their interview, and Stallone just does he takes it all in. He looks around the audience and then looks to the octagon cage, and he just goes, "It's a bunch of nonsense." It might have been De Niro, but one of them says it's a bunch of nonsense, and I laughed so hard, because that is still, in some ways fairly, and others not. That's boxing purists still feel like it's a circus. And so they go up there and they say that, and God bless him, Mike Goldberg, the guy who interviews him, he used to be the real play-by-play guy for the UFC, and sadly when the UFC was sold to an investment firm a few years ago, for whatever reason they cut Mike Goldberg, and hearing his voice it made me very nostalgic and made me miss him. But he straight up is asking them, "What don't you like about this?" And Stallone says, "We had a name for people that kicked in boxing, girls," and just completely burying the entire sport of MMA.
Well, I think it's the movie's given MMA an opportunity to show fans that they can have a good sense of humor about themselves. It's you don't have to take MMA seriously 24/7.
It really felt to me we were approaching the territory of that clip we used in our Crash episode of Siskel yelling at Ebert. "It's hooey, Roger. It's hooey." But who comes to defend the honor of the UFC and mixed martial arts at large? It is Chael P. Sonnen, the largest arm in Westland, Oregon, the former undisputed middleweight champion of the world, who is never going to turn down a buck. And that's God bless him, because he's here to say a few lines and be Chael Sonnen and then get punched in the face by Sylvester Stallone.
The cool thing about the scene, though, is that I think it's the first time that you see a hint of friendship, of camaraderie between Stallone and De Niro. They kind of join forces making fun of MMA,
And
which
the
I thought
cause
was delightful.
to bury the UFC. Back at Frankie Bright's gym, tensions run hot. There's an escalation of words between both LL Cool J and Robert De Niro, and then so they get in the ring and fight it out, and De Niro ends up knocking him out. It's all spurred on by De Niro, and only as De Niro can, your mother's a whore. And so... and he just says, and I named my son after her best trick. Isn't that right, BJ? And so, of course, this infuriates LL Cool J, and he gets kneed in the balls and punched in the face, and he's down for the count.
Well, he deserved it, though. He was suddenly trying to take over as trainer now that De Niro is kind of a hot property. You know, he wasn't even the guy that punched the MMA fighter, but he was standing next to Stallone, so that's enough to, I guess, raise his profile. So now LL Cool J wants to be his trainer, and De Niro's like, no, you know what? I already have a trainer, and you suck. Your mother's a whore. And then, you know, it escalates from there. But that's cool. I was glad that the movie balanced it out, because I felt like maybe they were building up Sly a little too much by giving him that big moment at the MMA fight. Yeah. But now, how do you balance it? Well, you have De Niro knock out LL Cool J, and now they're back on even ground.
We get the Anthony Hopkins level acting from the little boy asking what BJ stands for. And if you've ever wanted to hear Robert De Niro say butterscotch jelly beans, this is a movie for you. That's straight out of the Adam Sandler movie playbook of say something adult. And so when the kids wonder what it is, you have to make up something fun and juvenile.
De Niro and Bernthal, they handle it. I think that's the kind of stuff that it also doesn't go on for too long. Mm-hmm. So, and on top of that, Alex, it actually has an emotional payoff later in the movie. So I'm okay with this scene.
It does. I forgot about that. Yeah, they somehow make butterscotch jelly beans an emotional thing. Outstanding. The promotion that was garnered from the incident at the UFC event has driven the promotion for the fight overhead, and they need a bigger venue now. They're selling more tickets. There's the relationship between Sally and Henry is starting to grow closer together. The time is starting to fade, and the wounds are starting to heal. They go on a dinner date together. This is where we mentioned De Niro just goes off the rails as a terrible grandfather. He's looking after Trey, and he basically leaves him at the bar to just be with the barflies and the bartender and go off and try to shack up with some young lady of the night. And the little kid, as little kids will do, wanders off and tries to start the car, puts it in drive. De Niro pops up in his skivvies from the back seat and hit the brakes. And fortunately, no one's hurt, but it does lead to the police coming and having to take a statement. BJ comes, gets his son back, is very enraged by it all. It's definitely a setback for those of us in the movie that are watching and pulling for Billy the Kid.
You kind of wonder how does he come back from this? Because it's pretty bad that, you know, basically when a grandfather kind of maneuvers things in a way to where the police find them in a car having sex in the backseat of a car with his grandchild in the driver's seat. That's pretty bad. You can't just erase that from your memory. So the fact that the movie kind of convincingly gets us to a point where we believe that John Bernthal would have forgiven De Niro for that's pretty impressive.
We learn that Razor Sharp Sly is blind in his left eye, I believe it is, or one eye. I don't know if they actually call it out, but Alan Arkin figures it out. He's like, you're blind. I think he even slaps him. He's like, he can't see it coming.
The way that we find out in this movie is just fucking, it shakes you. Because I was not ready for this funny, even somewhat gentle for a sports movie story to suddenly have this pretty brutal car accident that just comes kind of out of nowhere. It was like the car crash in Whiplash. It just like did not see it coming. Stallone is driving Kim Basinger back home or whatever, and because he's blind, he shouldn't be out driving at night, and he gets hit by a truck or something, and thankfully the only thing that happens is Kim Basinger gets a cut on her forehead, and that's it. But Jesus, that came out of nowhere.
That's a good call. The car crash from Whiplash, it mirrored that definitely. And then, then at the hospital is when Alan Arkin slaps him and like realizes that he's blind in one eye. So I guess it would be the right eye based on the car wreck. He also works in to this. He said when that UFC bum bitch tried to punch you, he's like, anyone could have seen that coming. And again, just the incessant burial of the UFC. God bless.
I don't want us to get past this without calling out what is the best acting from Stallone in the movie, which is before the car crash when he's having the dinner date with Kim Basinger, and they've established by now that one of Stallone's hobbies is just creating little animals from scrap, from trash, right? He makes little knickknacks, and the joke is that he's making dogs, but everybody thinks they look like mice.
That's right.
And so he brings one out to the table and shows it to Kim B. And he's like, oh, here's like a mouse. He finally says a mouse. And then she goes like, oh, I think it looks like a dog. And Stallone's reaction to that, which is like blink and you miss it, but it's so good that in that moment, he's a better actor than De Niro, than Arkin, than everybody else. It's worth like rewinding, because I rewinded the movie just to see like if I was laughing just because of the joke, or if I was laughing because in addition to that, Stallone's reaction had been that good. And it is. He does this thing where, and it's so quick because obviously he's trying to keep Kim Basinger from noticing that he was pleasantly surprised, but he kind of like looks to the side and does, it's not even a fist bump, but it just, the way that he celebrates with his arms, it's a kind of like a yes, but also like, of course. It's great.
Yeah, I vaguely remember it's like this momentary, exhaustive celebration of like vindication when he does it. It's great. Stallone knows what he's doing, man. Even if he doesn't always show it, he knows what he's doing. So because of the blindness, the fight's off. De Niro is obviously pissed. We get Sly's Oscar scene, in my opinion, where he goes and speaks to, I believe this is where he meets BJ for the first time, but he goes to tell Kim Basinger, I'm going to fight. It's like, I have to. This is what I'm here to do.
I agree. It is his Oscar scene.
Which pretty much, I think there's a montage that separates them, but then that leads into De Niro's Oscar scene, where he goes to the football field and approaches his son, BJ. What's that dude's name? I keep forgetting.
John Berthel. But he approaches him and just says, I'm sorry. He talks about, being like an absent father. And this is where he brings the butterscotch jelly beans, correct? Yeah, he's like, I got these for Trey. And he brings out butterscotch jelly beans. And you're like, oh, it's from the dumb joke from earlier.
But then this is where we learn also that, he wasn't always an absent father, because he has the scrapbook of all of his sons' like accomplishments and, good grades and stuff. It's definitely the emotional tugs at the heartstrings scene. I thought it was pretty ballsy having two Oscar scenes back to back for your two lead actors.
And honestly, it's 3 Oscar scenes, because I didn't write this one as De Niro's Oscar clip. To me, it's when he goes to Stallone's house and he starts throwing rocks at the windows and trying to call him out and tell him like, why did you cancel the fight? And Stallone comes out and Kim Basinger comes out and De Niro just rips him a new one and just has this angry diatribe, basically telling him that that's not fair, that he can't do that, and just the anger. It just feels so honest. I mean, that's De Niro cutting loose. Like the scene with Berthel is great too, because it's just the sensitive side of De Niro. But this is Robert De Niro just telling Stallone what's what. And to Stallone's credit, he stands up to him. I mean, it's not that suddenly, it's not one of those scenes where you're like, oh man, De Niro just ate him alive and Stallone disappeared in the background. No, it's just like they stand toe to toe, like character wise, acting wise, and Kim Basinger is there to also kind of like call him out on their bullshit. So it's great.
So the fight's on. Fight night has arrived. We are greeted by the legendary trio of Larry Merchant, Jim Lampley, and Roy Jones Jr. Although you definitely wouldn't know it by this movie, Roy Jones Jr. is the member of the commentary team. He was former multi-time world champion in boxing, one of the most skilled boxers ever, and is an amazing commentator. Great color guy. But again, this is one of those weird examples of when in a movie setting, it just seems so forced and almost like he doesn't know what he's doing type thing. It's always fascinating when you come across that in situations like this. But the HBO boxing trio is there. It made me wax poetic for the days of HBO boxing, even though it's only been 3 years since they stopped airing boxing on HBO. Hearing Jim Lampley's voice takes me to a better place.
You know what else is great, Alex? The fucking needle drops in this movie. The final training montage. Please tell me you noticed. Of course you noticed that it's to that old favorite of ours, How You Like Me Now.
Oh my God, I forgot to take note of that. Probably because I was so captivated by what I was watching, but you're exactly right. Ugh, Eddie Strait pointing that out years and years ago, probably a decade at this point. The idea of any movie that has that song in the trailer for it is an immediate pass, or whatever he used to say about it. But yes, it was beautiful, and just like the long reflective shots of themselves in the mirror, questioning their gods and their internal strength, and how you like me now.
Yep. And then that kind of goes into I think before the match starts, when they're getting everything ready, it's that song War.
Yep.
And then De Niro comes out to the song from the opening of The Departed.
Shipping Up to Boston by the Dropkick Murphys.
Yes. And then Stallone comes out to Back in Black. It's amazing.
Jim Lampley has the awesome line of, well, it looks like no one told the city of Pittsburgh that this fight's a joke. And I always love that. We talked about that in Here Comes the Boom, when a movie that seems really silly and fantastical takes a moment to stop and remind you that it's like what you're watching is really silly. So Jim Lampley saying, everyone else in the world kind of thinks this is a joke. And sadly, since this fight, the idea of the geriatric boxing matches has really risen to more prominence than it did at the time of this. So in many ways, this movie foretold the future. It said, hey, in a few years now, Roy Jones and Mike Tyson are going to fight.
Do they get in as good shape as De Niro and Stallone in this movie?
Tyson got in really good shape. Roy Jones, bless his heart, but he needed a paycheck, and that's what he was there to do. Similar to Chael Sonnen here, because we do get one last shot of him. He's in the crowd watching the fight, and he just gives Stallone the bird. It's actually really funny, because Stallone just has this look on his face like, what's your problem? Oh, man, and speaking of getting that check, Michael Buffer there to say, let's get ready to rumble, and then turn to Peter Siegel and say, all right, give it to me. This motherfucker, man, he's been on something else we've done, because I know I've lamented about him and his legacy.
Was it Ready to Rumble?
Yes, it was, because WCW was paying that dude like 5 figures per appearance. He seems kind of like a huge douchebag, so on one level it's admirable. WCW would pay him like $50,000 to come in to do like 3 minutes of work. But then he would get there and not even take the time to learn the wrestlers' names. He one time introduced Bret Hart as Bret Clark, and then he just walked off and told, Bill Shaw or Eric Bischoff or someone, give me my money. So seeing him here, at first I rolled my eyes and was like, oh God, here we go. He's going to say, the words and then get his paycheck. But the hardest I laughed in this entire movie was his introduction of Robert De Niro. I don't know if you took note of it, but he's introducing Robert De Niro, and he's reading his cue card, weighing, blah, 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 from Pittsburgh. And then he's fighting out of the McDonough dealership where the rates are so low they'll knock you out, or 0% financing will knock you out. But he's reading it, and then he's getting confused while he's reading it, like someone slipped that into his cue card, but he's still reading it out loud. Brilliant. I laughed that was like a literal belly laugh. I was roaring at that, because then it cuts to De Niro and he cocks his fist as he's saying it. It's so good. Does the Fedor fist pump.
De Niro even says, we're open 24/7. We're open 7 days a week. Something like that.
Well, because it pays off so much, because you remember LL Cool J, the whole "your mother's a whore" came from, he told Billy the Kid, he's like, you're the biggest media whore of all. And so it just pays off that De Niro, even though he's about to satiate this long desire that he had and, potentially win back his self-respect, he still just has to get in, if he can make a dime, he's got to make sure to plug it in there, which so good. Also on top of that, this whole scene was just a bucket of chuckles, because we have, before they go out, we didn't mention it, but Alan Arkin refers to women vagina in this movie as snapper. And that's when he turns to Stallone before they walk out, he's like, you see all that talent out there? I'm definitely gonna get some snapper tonight or something like that. And then Kevin Hart's just like, I'm gonna be sick. It's one of those. It's a bit too raunchy to be in the trailer, but that would have been a perfect line to end the trailer on.
It's in the Red Band trailer.
There you go, the trailer that played before fucking The Expendables or something.
So this fight, Alex, I can't trust my reaction because I am not a boxing aficionado. So it's easy to impress me. My note just says, this is a better fight than any of the Rockies, than Raging Bull, any boxing fight I've ever glanced at. But of course, I would say that because to me it's just, I don't know much about the sport. I don't know how realistic this is. I don't know how familiar this is. So to you, a boxing fan, is this as good as it looks to me? Because to me it looks amazing. The back and forth and the stakes. We know that Stallone is half blind, but nobody else knows. Well, I guess, Arkin and Kim Basinger know. De Niro doesn't know. His son doesn't know. Kevin Hart doesn't know. And the strategies, the brutality, at times you feel like Stallone's going to win. At times you feel like De Niro's going to win. And I said earlier, my preference was De Niro. But honestly, the movie had built up both of them as if it could go either way. Because
it's definitely
you could say
your classic boxing movie showdown. The back and forth of it all, and then eventually the complete baffling of helping each other up after they knock them down just to help each other make the final bell. Not really sure the legalities of that within the realm of fighting, but or boxing, I should say. I mean, it definitely adds to the drama here and is something that I wish I would see more of in real fighting. But I do appreciate they show this almost in a montage form, but they take some time to really settle in on some of the aspects of the fight. Because when the fight begins, in a standard boxing movie, you'd think, oh, there's about 6 or 7 minutes of the movie left. No, there's 20 minutes in the movie left here. They make sure to show it in all its glory and to make us feel every bit of that split decision victory at the end for Razor.
They go the distance. There's no knockout in this one.
Yeah, exactly. Because even Billy the Kid, his grandson, said, sorry you lost, kid. And his son BJ affirms he didn't lose anything because they all win in the end. They all celebrate together.
And the real victory is the boxing friends we made along the way.
They both tell each other, no excuses. May the better man win. This was my last, roarous laugh of the movie when they're all in the ring and Alan Arkin, I guess, had turned his headset, his hearing aid off. And he just said, what? Fix! Bullshit! And Stallone has to tell him, no, we won. Oh, okay. So the fight's over, and we go to 3 months later and seeing how everything's doing. Razor's still living in the same place. Looks like he's living a better life. And we're seeing that the whoring of his image has not ended for Billy McDonough, who is now on Dancing with the Stars. And I do have in my notes here, horrifying Robert De Niro CGI.
You don't think that's De Niro dancing?
It's like the first wave of games on the PSP when the camera was attached that you could map your own face onto a character on it, but it always came out like Jaws from GoldenEye where the faces weren't accurately mapped. It's something else.
But maybe that's the point that the movie is making. Maybe it's just that the De Niro character had licensed his face to Dancing with the Stars. The important thing is that Alan Arkin seems to approve.
And he's ribbing Kevin Hart once again, as he's a payoff from earlier in the movie about soaking your feet or fists in horse urine to help rejuvenate them. But he tells Kevin Hart it's vinegar. So we get the last image is Kevin Hart wafting it into his nose. It's strong. All right, Julio, we've given it the Contrarians treatment. I think it's time for us to figure out how we both actually feel about it.
Let's do it. Let's go to real talk. Q, how you like me now?
And then they go, Joe, you ready? Sit down, take the paper. And I'm like, I got this.
Yeah.
And I went backwards, and he walked in, and the first time I looked at him, cut! Joey, what happened? Nothing. I just got overwhelmed there for a second. You see the guy from Goodfellas.
Yeah, that's right.
You see the devil from Angel Heart. You see Mean Streets. All the faces that he's been in Godfather. And you just choke.
Right.
If you want me to tell you the truth, I just choked. I choked the first 3 times. I was like, okay. And then the second day, he came up and was like, "This play light." That was the day when I told him he had man boobs.
Yeah.
And that day was great. And then there was another scene the next day where he had to call me a fat fuck. And he came over to me. He goes, "I'm gonna say fat fuck. Does that bother you? If it bothers you, I won't say it." I go, You're Robert De Niro. If you put it in my ass right now, I will not complain. You understand me? At least I got the fucking power that De Niro fucked me in the ass.
And we are back, ready for Real Talk. But before we go into Real Talk, we're going to go into PP, our patron pitch. This is the segment where we tell patrons what they can expect on our patron channel. And we also let non-patrons know what they're missing out on. So maybe they'll decide to become patrons at the end of this segment. So if you are a patron, you'll get all the stuff that doesn't make it into this episode. We usually have to cut a fair amount of minutes of our episodes just because, for time. And also because sometimes we digress. We'll also have Contrarians After Hours, in which we discuss things that we've seen or that we've read or that we played that obviously have nothing to do with the current episode. And then we also have special patron picks and exclusive episodes for patrons this month. Our patron exclusive is a real talk about the movie Beautiful Girls. Beautiful Girls is one of those movies, much like Alex did with Bachelorette a couple months ago, that I'm like, I don't know that it works with our regular format, but for a patron exclusive, I think that'll be an interesting conversation. That should be coming later this month for patrons everywhere. Now, as far as the After Hours segment goes, Alex, what are you bringing to the table?
We're going to talk about Get Out. I watched Get Out for the first time this weekend, and then also just a quick discussion of a 1967 French film called Weekend that I watched this week also. So I'm interested. We never really talked about Get Out. I somehow made it the 4 or 5 years since it was released, spoiler free.
Wow.
So that was, I know. So that was nice. So I think you and I can discuss that because I really don't know how you feel about it. So that's what I'm bringing to the table this time.
On my end, if you follow me on Twitter, you saw that I was watching A Hard Day's Night and wondering out loud, if you were to make that movie today, which band you would use and whether it could even be made, if it would be possible. So I want to talk a little more about that. And then I also watched this movie, this Nicole Kidman vehicle called Destroyer, which I'm going to try to recommend to you. I think it's well worth watching. And actually, I should thank our buddies from Draft Zero because they're the reason I watched it. They had an episode where they were talking about how the movie handles different timelines. And I knew that I wanted to watch it, but then just knowing that I had that podcast episode waiting for me made it so that I would move it up the ladder on priority. So that's what you can expect in Contrarians After Hours. If you want to check out our Patreon channel, is patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. The name is The Contrarian Supplements, and you can look at our 4 tiers there. Take a look at them and see which way you would like to contribute if you want to.
Yes, our tiers of $1, $3, $5, and $10 get you increasingally more access, but for the price of just a little bottle of Jack Daniels, you can get some exclusive Contrarians content. Even just the $1 tier, get a little bottle of Jack Daniels, get the $1 donation, listen to some of our exclusive episodes, listen to our King of Comedy episode, and just kind of relax and have a fun evening with it all.
You can join brand new patron Ryan Swilinski. I hope that's how you pronounce his last name, because I never had to pronounce his last name before. Welcome, Ryan, to the Contrarian Supplements family. He just joined us. I don't know if it was the Crash episode or if it was the Showgirls episode that finally convinced him to make the jump. But either way, we're happy to have him. That's Ryan from Spit and Polish and the recently mentioned Yum Yum podcast. So again, welcome, Ryan. Patreon.com/Contrarian Prime. Give it a shot.
You shan't regret it. All right, Grudge Match. Kind of started off the first portion talking about the posters for this movie. So I think the one they settled on was a copy of The Wrestler, where it was like the sepia tone with De Niro and Stallone resting on the ropes. They're like smiling, though. They're not exhausted like Randy the Ram. But the font is very similar, and yeah, the tone of it is almost the same.
I mean, this is kind of Stallone's The Wrestler, so I can see why they went with that.
I guess if that's where you want to take that, that's fine.
Or De Niro's The Wrestler?
It's nobody's The Wrestler. Maybe Alan Arkin. One of the posters for it was like, I think it was the original theatrical one, was like a fight poster. Like looked like an old aged Thrilla in Manila style poster, Rumble in the Jungle type shit. But Stallone looks normal on it, and De Niro is like horrifyingly photoshopped. I don't know if it was a different body they used or something, but his face looks nothing like De Niro, which unfortunately was a trend in this. They obviously had to do a lot more Hollywood magic with De Niro in this, which I don't really get, because even by the end, I guess when you had to show him back in his heyday, is like ripped and shit, we had to get crazy with it. But he's still like, he was a 70-year-old man when this was made. I thought he looked pretty presentable by the end of it.
We can only hope to look that way when we get to 70, if we get to 70.
No joke. And then you got Sly, who, as we've talked about, I think has some chemical advantages in his physique. But, I mean, he's a 67-year-old man with fucking a six-pack. Come on now. Anyway, seems like they couldn't really come up with an idea of how they wanted to market this from a, physical marketing perspective, with some of these posters looking like a boxing movie and then others looking like a family comedy, and that weird feel-good shit, and lack of preparation or lack of understanding on how to market this movie definitely showed in its box office return. As I mentioned in the first half, a budget of $40 million with a box office return of just under $45 million. Did not translate well to the box office. Do you think the Christmas Day release had anything to do with that?
I mean, it doesn't scream Christmas movie, so that's a problem.
Like, it really felt like they just put like Christmas lights in the background in a few scenes just to like justify it, or just to say, yeah, it's a Christmas movie. See,
there's no snow. I think that's the main problem. I needed snow.
Yeah, it's not, as you said, it is not a white Christmas.
Do you know what else? What else came out?
Wolf of Wall Street came out that day.
Ooh, no.
And we have probably had this discussion before, because also that's the same day Walter Mitty came out, and that had a tough time at the box office. Two movies I would rather rewatch than Wolf of Wall Street: Secret Life of Walter Mitty and Grudge Match.
It would take you less time to.
Yeah, I was just about to say, watch both of them, and I'd still have an hour left as opposed to watching. So, in addition to competing with The Wolf of Wall Street, Julio, it still was going up against American Hustle, which had been released 2 weeks previously on December, looks like 13th of 2013. Yeah, so...
De Niro competing against himself.
God, Walter Mitty is actually a really good movie, and we've talked about that before. Going against Scorsese and then going against David O. Russell, you would think that Walter Mitty would be the artsy option on the side. So I think, the release date for this was very ill-advised. Who did they think they were going to catch? What overflow did they think they were going to catch with this?
Boxing fans.
On Christmas Day. Boxing fans who traditionally don't really leave their house that often to begin with.
But isn't the 26th Boxing Day?
Oh, God. Moving on. Yeah, it seems like this was kind of a bad idea to release this on Christmas Day. Maybe the movie in general was, but releasing this on Christmas Day with that competition at hand, that's still when I was working at the theater, and I remember thinking that Wolf of Wall Street being released on Christmas Day was a bit of a curious decision, but what do I know, because that movie made $400 million. They couldn't give Grudge Match just a little piece of this. Scorsese couldn't be like, hey, my buddy Bob's got a movie out, go see that.
Yeah. The post-credits sequence in Wolf of Wall Street, it's just Scorsese saying, hey, you have fun? You like boxing?
You want some laughs? Go down to a couple theaters. See the movie.
You like my movie Raging Bull? You ever wish there was a sequel?
Well, it's nothing like that, but, give it a shot. We say this, did not do well at the box office. It still came in with a 31% on Rotten Tomatoes. So despite the fact that, it didn't translate to wide audiences, I'm sure there were people that paid to see it and enjoyed it, and there were clearly some critics that enjoyed it. Julio, what were the positives about this?
I have 4 fresh quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website, starting with Matthew Razak from Flixist.com. It says, Grudge Match is definitely not your best option in theaters this holiday. Far, 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 really, really, really far from it. That being said, and despite the fact that it is cliche and obvious, the movie delivers some heart. That's why I'm glad that you told me which movies were playing, because this guy, it sounds like he liked everything else that was playing better than Grudge Match. But it's still he gave him he gave Grudge Match a fresh review on Rotten Tomatoes.
Did he spell Hart Hart like Kevin Hart?
No, but he should have.
Damn it.
But that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fars on the sentence. 6 fars and 3 reallys. John Nickham from Kansas City Star says, Grudge Match could have been a cash grab disaster. Instead, it's sort of respectable. That's as far as they're going to go. Sort of respectable.
That was like a Martin Scorsese little line there. But, it's kind of respectable.
It's my friend, Bob. Rich Klein from ContactMusic.com says, it's a little annoying that this high-concept marketing project, in parentheses, Rocky versus Raging Bull, is as entertaining as it is. We want to hate it, as tired actors are sending up their own faded images.
That's pretty similar to the Peter Travers review I read. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone said something similar. Watching De Niro and Stallone piss all over their most iconic roles provides no pleasure. Made me feel sad. Which, I don't know. Obviously, from an aesthetic standpoint, the idea, is Rocky versus Jake LaMotta, but I didn't feel like they were pissing on their roles. They weren't playing the same characters. It was just kind of, it is what it is.
Yeah, they're very different. I mean, this is not the, how there's like disaster movie and love movie and scary movie. This is not like the boxing movie where where the characters are just parodies of something that you already know from pop culture. This was just its own thing. Also, I don't know that when he's talking about De Niro's faded image, you don't, at least when I think Robert De Niro, I go back to, Goodfellas, Casino, even Taxi Driver before I go to Raging Bull.
Absolutely.
Got one more. Wesley Morris from Grandland says, by the time Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro start training for the big match, it's called Grudge Day, you give in because, surprisingly, both actors have reported for duty, especially De Niro.
Okay.
They reported for duty. I've seen De Niro do much worse, and I've seen Stallone do much worse.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm on the side. I just kind of sit in the middle of it.
I think before we even get into like the realest of real talks, I just want to know, who are you rooting for now that we're in real talk?
I guess De Niro probably, just because he's Robert De Niro. His story, I don't know. At a certain point in the movie, it was such a cliche Rocky Balboa story of the underdog fighting that it was like I finally wanted Rocky to lose type thing. Of just having someone else have their moment in the sun. I mean, he lost in Rocky Balboa, but I know they filmed multiple endings to the movie, so somewhere on film there's the Robert De Niro wins ending, or Billy the Kid wins. As with any movie like this that has two logical conclusions, I think that's pretty commonplace now in Hollywood that they'll film multiple endings just to avoid spoilers getting out. I was rooting for De Niro. I was rooting for Alan Arkin pretty much the whole time. And then I was rooting for it to be over about 90 minutes into it.
You own this, right?
No. We didn't cover that in the first half, so as the internet will do, it always fumbles the ball for you, Julio. It was free on Tubi, but that was last week when it was April, and then on the 1st of May, it went off of Tubi, and then it went on to Hulu for free, but Julio, you did not know that. You ended up paying money to watch Grudge Day.
Yes, I did. Now I know. Beware of the changing of the guard at the end of the month.
This has happened to us before, too, with something else. I can't remember what it was, but...
It happened to me during our Halloween series.
Yes. Yeah. So, I watched on Hulu. Quality was good. As most streaming places are, they bring the bacon. I do not own this. I don't have much of a desire to own this. It was one of those I would pause it to go get a drink or something to eat. I would be just shocked and appalled at how much was left in the movie. Like, I remember pausing it like 45 minutes in, and there was an hour and 10 minutes left, and I was like mad. I was like, why? That's early feedback on Grudge Match here in Real Talk is the length was very, very unnecessary. I know I stretched it out there talking about like the releases that came out and trying to figure out why this tanked. It obviously didn't tank. It made its budget back, but it wasn't what you would expect to be based on, some of the previous, like Rocky Balboa, what that pulled in, and typically what a Robert De Niro movie does. But I really meant what I said. From the marketing to some of the presentation of the movie, it seems to kind of have an identity crisis. It can't really figure out what kind of movie it wants to be. And I think the problem is it kind of, on more than occasions than not, it sides on the let's be a family comedy type movie. And that's where you have like the butterscotch jelly bean shit. And then you have like the sentimental beats of like, making good with my son and shit like that. And it seems like if, with the talent you have involved, if you had actually committed to making this a bit darker and edgier and showing that not having this third fight, while it seems from the outside like Robert De Niro had a successful life, he's still tormented by this. And again, I'm not talking like Nolan Batman dark, but just a little bit more grit to it and a little bit more character to these people. And about, how Stallone lives a modest life, is not unhappy with his life, but feels like a lot was taken away from him. They tell you these things in the movie, but then it's sandwiched in between fluff jokes and, things to make the audience feel at ease. I felt that while we do get some good acting in this and flashes of brilliance from almost everyone involved, I feel like there was definitely a much better movie to be made with these parts, and that it just took the safe route, and I feel like it really paid for it and made the people involved look silly on more than one occasion.
So you want this to be like Warrior? I mean, Warrior is a completely different story, but tone-wise, because Warrior is not.
I think that's
the comedy is minimal in that movie.
Yeah. Is there any comedy in that, like intentional comedy? Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. But still, you can add some levity to it. Like, I want nothing about Alan Arkin changed. And I think even Kevin Hart's character, there could have been a more maniacal edge given to, because he's a fucking boxing promoter. They're the scum of the earth. There could have been some, just reptilian aspect added to his character. I don't know, man. I have mixed feelings about it. The length really hurts my ability to objectively analyze it, because like the end with the fight taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes, like that was just too much. And the montages that are drawn out to make the audience laugh, it was just a bit much for me. But I do have some positive things to say about it. So that was like my quick review of it, Julio. So hit me with yours first, and then we'll break it down with the players involved.
So to me, actually, I think I'm on the opposite side, Alex. Although we probably enjoyed it about the same, but I guess we'll find out when we get to the end of this conversation. But maybe it's because I'm not as familiar with the idea of old men fighting. But to me, I don't know that I would have been able to take it seriously if they hadn't treated it mostly as a comedy. Like, when you tell me De Niro and Stallone get back in the ring in their late 60s, to me that's a comedy. Like, that's the pitch for a comedy. If it's going to be like a serious movie, then I think, to me, it would have to be even darker than what you want. Like, in the serious version of that movie, I wouldn't see a room for a character like Alan Arkin's. Of course, not for Kevin Hart either. This would be just really, if we're gonna get dramatic about old men having to get up in the ring and beat each other to resolve their issues, like, that's some heavy shit. And so there wouldn't be like a middle ground for me there. If we're gonna try to take it more seriously than the movie does right now, it would have to be just like a fucking Darren Aronofsky. Then it would be The Wrestler,
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love to see that movie. I think that movie would be great, but it would be so different from this. I mean, you would have to basically start from scratch, other than just the basic pitch. And man, I don't know that Stallone can carry that movie. De Niro can probably do it, but
Stallone could. If you had Copland Stallone, he could.
That's true. He would have to work a lot harder than he does in this movie, though, in the current incarnation of Grudge Match.
Yeah, and you would have to get him to take himself out of it and be able to be like, hey, we're trying to make something real here.
Did you see The Wrestler? Okay, we're trying to do that, but with boxing.
Yeah, he tried to get me. I turned him down.
Man, this back-to-back with Tango and Cash, your Stallone impressions are on point.
Yeah, I guess you're right too. The biggest problem is that they already did the old man coming back to fight with Rocky Balboa. They already did, is this a joke? This is a joke. And the whole thing of the HBO boxing team being there and presenting the fight with Mason the Lion Dixon, and like that was an exhibition fight for charity or whatever. And then this, it's just kind of like, yeah, no one's gonna sanction this, y'all. Like I'm exactly with you. That's where it becomes like a comedy, and because it's so silly in the end. So like the end, when it actually comes to the fight, it just feels like a carbon copy of Rocky Balboa. And then the actual fight is so Hollywood bullshit with them helping each other up. And somewhere this movie we're crafting, we need the comedic relief of Alan Arkin, but then we need them, like this fight needs to be something more guttural. It can't be this big fancy presentation. So I think you and I are now realizing the strife and struggle that Peter Siegel came across, and what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
It has to be they're just fighting in like some underground arena.
Like a bare knuckle fight, like the end of Snatch type thing, like where Brad Pitt fights in that. They go and, because there are old fuckers that fight in bare knuckle boxing in Britain like that still to this day. But again, Peter Siegel, when the director we're working with here, you know, his biggest claim to fame is probably Tommy Boy. You should understand kind of what you're in for, and that's kind of what we talk about when we do these. It's fine for what it is. I had a good enough time watching it, but you see the people involved, you know what they're capable of, and then it's only human nature, at least with the way you and I think about these things, to start like piecing together your own version of how this could be good, because it sounds really dumb on paper and it's really dumb in execution. And I remember when I went to see it originally, I saw this in the theater when it came out. I remembered wanting to be proven wrong, wanting to see that, you know, they actually made something out of this that was salvageable. And like I said, I didn't remember if I liked it or not. I think I probably enjoyed it more than I expected myself to upon rewatch for the podcast here, but it left me like wanting more. And we've talked about De Niro later in life, De Niro and the movies he's made and some of the choices he's made, which, you know, understandably so for personal life and all that shit. So like a movie like this, I don't know about you, there were moments in this where I saw like De Niro, like prime De Niro, just like flashes of him coming through, and it was like, fuck yes. But then it would just revert back to, you know, kind of just I used the word meandering earlier in describing the movie, and that's kind of what it just felt like. And then Stallone, I really like you called out that one scene. Were you being serious about his physical acting in the scene with the sculpture?
Yes, I loved it.
Yeah,
that's his best moment in the movie, and his Oscar clip is also pretty good.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing in those roles, and like for all the jesting and cliched and stereotypes about him, he's good. He's a good actor, and so like exactly what you're talking about, and the Oscar clip, and the same thing with that. There's flashes of brilliance. It's not on par with Rocky Balboa or something like that, or obviously it's not Copland, but it's everyone has their flashes, except, in my opinion, for Kim Basinger. She's just the definition of there. Mm-hmm. Like, she's just there, and it seemed like everyone who made this had a good time doing it. Cool. But like Kim Basinger, if I was gonna talk about this movie, she would definitely be the one I point to that just like nothing she did had any flashes of, you know, potential or brilliance to me. It was just kind of like she was composite character A, or just, you know, token female character A type thing. Right,
but that's what they gave her. I mean, you know, that's unlike everybody else. She never gets a big moment. She's there for everybody else's big moments, but she doesn't get the stuff that Alan Arkin does. I mean, she has that speech where she explains why she cheated on Sly, but even then, the scene favors him as far as performance. You know, he gets the big moments because her character is just kind of, I mean, you just said
very phallocentric movie.
Yeah, she doesn't really get much to do other than, I guess, be the voice of reason, and so she's automatically the most boring person in the movie. And I actually kind of resented. I know she was doing the right thing, but the moment where she goes and tells John Bernthal that Stallone is blind and basically changes the course of the fight in doing so, like, it made me mad, even though I know it's the right thing to do. Like morally, it was the right thing to do, but it just felt like, I don't know. I know it's stupid macho bullshit, but it made me mad on behalf of Stallone because I'm like, he didn't want anybody to know.
Yeah.
It made me mad on the side of De Niro because I'm like, this fucker is finally getting his comeback and you're taking it from him by basically sabotaging his strategy by telling his trainer. And again, I mean, if I step back, I know humanly that's the right thing to do. Like Stallone was basically going to kill himself up there on the ring. But I think maybe because the movie hadn't really done anything to get me on her side when she makes this decision, I was not invested. And I was like, no, what are you doing? You're ruining it.
Yeah.
So that's probably my take on Kim Basinger is just that it's not on her, but the writing and the directing, they didn't do her any favors.
Yeah, and John Bernthal also kind of there, but he even has a few moments of like, that's my dad, or emotional resonating moments.
I think he has chemistry with De Niro, like chemistry that Stallone and Kim Basinger don't have. Like the chemistry that Stallone has with Alan Arkin, De Niro has with Bernthal. And I really like the scene where he asked him to train him, and they go on. They have like a pretty good back and forth that, to me, knowing how De Niro likes to improvise when he's in certain movies, to me that scene read like De Niro improvising and John Bernthal keeping up with him, because they go back and forth about the cars that he drives and what he did when he played football, and it just felt but it felt improvised in a good way, not the way that gets under my skin and ruins the movies for me. This actually felt
Not
like, oh wow, two actors.
21 Jump Street way.
Yes, exactly. But here's the other thing: like, they're not being funny. That's the other thing. It's not that they're improvising to kind of like one up their punchlines. They're just kind of doing that thing where they improvise kind of to showcase the chemistry, if it's there, and in this case it is. So that's the moment that I think they really won me over. So I was like, man, that was really good, and now he's going to be training him, so I'm on their side. And I think that I came with the baggage of having a very specific image of John Bernthal. It's funny because I'm used to seeing him as an asshole and a guy that's very complicated, and then suddenly seeing him play somebody who's a lot simpler, it became a positive. It's like, oh, so he can do that. He can just be the closest to a regular guy that this movie has. He can pull it off. So I think that helped him. That became an advantage from my end. And then, like I said, Kevin Hart, Alan Arkin, they're top of their game.
Yeah, that's before we get to them, we talked about Stallone. I gave my thoughts on De Niro. What was your takeaway of De Niro in this?
I mean, I think it's great. I mean, that's not okay. So great. It's funny because we just did that Patreon episode for The King of Comedy. So of course
there are levels to this shit when it comes to De Niro.
Exactly. Like, this is not The King of Comedy De Niro. This is not Goodfellas De Niro. I think that there are times when you watch De Niro and you see something new being created, and there are times when you watch De Niro and you're like, okay, this is a familiar tune, just really well played. And that was the case with Grudge Match. I'm like, this is not hitting any new notes. And it's not about Raging Bull, because honestly, I watched Raging Bull decades ago and I haven't revisited since. So my memory of Raging Bull, other than De Niro gaining a lot of weight at some point, I'm not bringing that into this. But it's just I guess that specific type of comedy, De Niro being a loudmouth and just being pretty aggressive. It works in the context of the movie, and it works because De Niro is good, but it's not breaking new ground. I think in this case, De Niro doesn't benefit from us having watched The King of Comedy so recently, because now I'm like, well, this is good, but you have greatness in you, Bob.
Yeah.
But I like him. And he made me laugh several times. And
was there anything you cringed at that they made him do?
I don't think I ever got to cringing. I mean, some stuff is just silly, like the green suit stuff is silly, and the stuff with him having sex in the car is silly. It is not I cringe when I see the trailers for Bad Grandpa or that shit. This was right up to the line, but doesn't cross it. And what I was going to say is that it actually, the emotional moments work for me. When he gets really emotional in the movie, like when he gets mad and starts breaking Stallone's windows because he's like, motherfucker, you're cheating me again. I was with it. I was like, oh man, he's got that fire back. And when he gives John Berthel the scrapbook, I was like, that's cool, because it's just so, in the context of the movie, it downplays it, like De Niro he plays it down in his delivery, and the movie doesn't like, the movie could have blown it up, that big moment, but instead they just let him walk away, and John Berthel just has that one close up after he looks through the book, and that's enough, And so, how do you feel? What made you cringe with De Niro?
I was literally about to say, well, the thing that made me cringe, the part where they announce the fight and then De Niro runs out in the street and goes, 30 years, 30 years. Yeah, it was like, it was one of those things we were talking about, actors that are acting like they don't know how to act. I was like, what the fuck is he doing? But that seemed to me like my immediate read was like, all right, this was after a long day. He didn't want to be there, and they told him they needed to take it this. That's like, like I said, at a certain level, though, I admire that an actor that intentionally does something bad or seems like they can't act that was the only part that was like that. I meant what I said in the first portion. I think there were some really good laughs. The part of them doing the ad for the casino was really funny. De Niro working in a plug for his dealership into his title card, his ring introduction, was really funny. On like a just kind of throwing my hands up in a what kind of way, the just incessant burial of MMA and the UFC was very funny to me. That was the other thing, the big cameo with Chael Sonnen. It made no sense in the context of this movie. Like, people going to see this movie don't know who Chael P. Sonnen is, despite the fact that at one point in time he was a draw. And I mean by one point in time, I mean like a couple years, maybe he had a good name, but he was never at the level of being like the recognizable face of the sport. Maybe like Chuck Liddell, or they could have done here, and then people, Jane and John Q. Public that went to see this would have known who that was, but that was really baffling, and it just kind of felt really shoehorned. Even as someone like me who gets the entirety of the gag, it felt shoehorned and unnecessary. To me, I would have rathered they had used that time and effort to get more cameos from the boxing world, because that would have made more sense in the confines of the movie. That's me griping as a combat sports fan. As a movie fan, that scene and several others just felt completely superfluous overall, because the runtime, this is a movie, a classic example of the Mattis rule. If this had been 90 minutes, in no way would I have found any part of it offensive or, quote unquote bad. No reason for this movie to be 2 hours long. I don't think it's with Stallone, we talked about already. I was reading while we were doing this. He got nominated for Worst Actor for the Razzies for that. No. I didn't think he was that bad. No. Especially, like, the people he was up against were Adam Sandler in Grown Ups, Ashton Kutcher in Jobs, Johnny Depp in Lone Ranger, and Jaden Smith in After Earth. Stallone is fine, especially in comparison to those.
Oh, yeah. I agree. No, he's not. He's just not De Niro. And he's not, at least to me, he's not... I don't know. That's just like a personal preference. I think, Sly needs to go like a little deeper for me to find him more charismatic. It might be leftover resentment from Tango and Cash. I literally finished editing that episode last night, and so I think that there might be some leftover stuff there. But like I said, he's better than that movie. I think that I constantly find myself thinking this is good, but you could have a better actor and it would be even better. And it's like a double-edged sword, because there are moments that really work and actually they feel better to me because it's Stallone and he's like surprising me, like his Oscar clip, and I'm just like, all right, he brought it, and it works because he looks like Stallone and he looks like a beaten up dude. But yeah, no, he does not deserve a Razzie. God, come on, guys, not for
what
this
are we doing here? Yeah, oh no, there's definitely other ones you could put that pin on, but. And then moving on here to the dual MVP, where we give our credit, the majority of the credit for the movie. In my case, Alan Arkin, and yours, Kevin Hart. I think, like we talked about, and trying to piece together something really good from this project we were given, I think they're the part of like the family fun comedy that works for me. The aspect of, I wish the Stallone and De Niro side of it was a bit more serious and you could still keep this in for laughs. Kevin Hart is used sparingly enough in this that it never becomes all about Kevin Hart and exhausting sometimes like his comedy can be, and just like his whole, I'm Kevin Hart thing, which has made him a lot of money. It's just for me personally, as we've talked about, listener to the podcast, Eddie Strait will agree with me, the best use of Kevin Hart ever was his role in 40-Year-Old Virgin, because you consolidate what he's really good at to one impactful moment. And with this, it's kind of sprinkled throughout it. And I think he did really well with what he was given, and also like just really spastic, and he was given enough to react with. And it was a novelty to see him interact with Stallone and De Niro. I think even if it didn't all land, just the interactions with them were entertaining enough.
Yeah, he holds his own. He seems pretty fearless going against him. And you were right in Contrarians Corner. I mean, the best is him and Arkin, which, I mean, they get maybe 3 scenes together. I don't know if it was.
I would believe if Peter Siegel told me that they just told them, riff, and they filmed it, I would believe that was just them going back and forth.
Yeah, I think my favorite is when Arkin goes to tell him that the fight is off, that Stallone's not going to do it, and then Arkin walks away. And Kevin Hart goes like, "Oh, you're just gonna slowly walk away from me. You're not even gonna walk away fast."
One of the reviews here, who was it? John DeFori from The Hollywood Reporter said, "The movie only wakes up when Hart and Arkin are on screen, preferably together." And I think that kind of, maybe not to that extreme, but it shares the sentiments we had. And yeah, their interactions are great. And I know I was really leaning into it hard in the first portion, but that really was when Alan Arkin was on screen, and even though he's only given 20% or whatever you want to say, and even though Peter Siegel, it's kind of a joke but also true, he just wanted Grandpa Hoover from Little Miss Sunshine and said just go with it, and that's fine. Like I said, the last line that he has where he starts bitching about the decision because he didn't pay attention to it, that's fucking hilarious. That is genuinely funny stuff. So I thought they were both great, and
I just realized as you were talking about Arkin that really he does the movie a great service, and you could argue maybe it's even that it needed to be more for me, which is that he really humanizes Stallone's side of the conflict for me, because I was thinking about it. I was like, what is it that doesn't work on that side? It's not just the performance, because I mean, again, we could go back and forth. I was like, I can find as many things that work in Stallone's performance as things that don't, but I think that even though, I totally get it, his girlfriend slept with his sports arch enemy, and that sent him into a spiral, right? But the idea that his response to this was to call off the fight and just retire from boxing, that I think that needed more work. And I don't know that it's just that when Stallone is explaining that, he's just not like the performance doesn't sell it, or is it just that it doesn't make sense no matter who you put? Anthony Hopkins could be telling me that story, I'll be like, that doesn't make sense, man, because he says De Niro took the thing that he loved the most from him, so he wanted to take the thing that loved the most from De Niro. Therefore, he knew that retiring would fuck with De Niro's head. So I guess kind of like on paper it makes sense, but when you're experiencing the movie, it just never felt to me like I could really, that felt so artificial. Everything else in the movie, I'm like, I get it, but to me it felt like, oh, Stallone's character is just kind of bending himself over backwards so that the story can happen this way. Did you have the problem, or were you like, no, that's how boxers act?
It's funny you mentioned that, Julio. Several years ago, there was a pretty famous or infamous, depending on your prerogative, fight with Adrian the Problem Broner and Paulie Malignaggi, where a lot of the turmoil and bad blood surrounding it had to do with Adrian Broner hooking up with Paulie Malignaggi's girlfriend. And after Broner won, he said in the post-fight interview, I took his belt and his girl. And then Paulie Malignaggi walks up, and a very memeable thing now, he's like, hey, I respect, and he does the thing where he puts his hand on the microphone and tries to push it down so that the people can't hear it, but it's the camera's right there and everything, and he's just like, hey, I respect that you won, but don't be talking, that's my side piece, don't be talking about my side piece, and yells at him. It's absolutely absurd. I think the most famous retirements in boxing were for matters of pride, but that it was all from things that spawned in the ring. Marvin Hagler retired after his fight with Sugar Ray Leonard because he he was so disgusted by the decision. He thought he'd won and thought the decision was such bullshit that allegedly he legit never put a pair of gloves on again. I don't know if I believe that as far, but I know he never fought again.
That's a better story, dude, than what Stallone gave us here.
I guess they could do that, but then like the Kim Basinger character kind of falls to the wayside. I mentioned Lennox Lewis. That was clearly a matter of wanting to preserve legacy. He didn't want to get his ass kicked by Vitaly Klitschko, and there's plenty of cases about it. I don't know of one like this, but again, this is a movie, so that you need something like this.
Maybe I'm just too old to really sympathize with somebody who can't get over a woman.
I would agree with that.
Or a partner. Just in general, it's like, yeah, it sucks that you were cheated on, but you're basically giving up on life over that. And as I get older, I'm like, that's for kids,
Yeah.
Adults kind of like dust themselves off and move on unless they have like a serious problem. Okay, maybe you're actually dealing with depression, and then this trigger. Okay, but the movie's not saying that.
No.
The movie's painting us in like, oh well, his girlfriend cheated on him, and then he decided that he was quitting to hurt
didn't want
De
it
Niro.
anymore.
Like, yeah. You know what? Also, there is a much better angle to it, which is that late in the movie, Stallone admits that he knows that he only defeated De Niro because De Niro hadn't trained properly.
Yeah.
And man, that to me is much more interesting than, De Niro slept with my girlfriend. If they had made it to where Stallone's character was actually, he didn't want a third match because he was afraid that he would lose to De Niro. He's like, I got lucky and I beat him in the second one because he got cocky. But if we fight a third time, he's gonna beat me. So instead, I'm just gonna retire. Forget about Kim Basinger. To me, that's a lot more interesting. He ends up confessing that to Alan Arkin.
And it gives De Niro's character a whole lot more like oomph to it. So
right,
yeah.
And then when Stallone finally beats him, you're like, okay, well he's proven himself. Here they just threw it kind of like at the very end, and it doesn't really matter much. So yeah, figure it out.
Come back to us when you factored in the feedback. See, then we'll see what we get you. I actually, from the sounds of it, you enjoyed it kind of more than I was expecting you to. I think the De Niro, Arkin, and Hart trifecta really add some mileage to it. And my thing with the length was just, I had seen it before, and then knowing that you could tell this story in a more consolidated way kind of weighed on me. But I would not say this is a bad movie, and I would not deter anyone away from watching it if they said, hey, should I watch this? I'd be like, yeah, there's plenty about it to get you through one viewing. I'm not going to tell you to go, watch it on Hulu. It's free. Sorry, Julio. I'm not going to tell you to go buy it or anything like that, but there's enough to it that it's worth watching once. Not great, not bad either. I think because of that, I fall dead in the middle with a C. Not plus, minus, none of that bullshit. Just dead in the middle. It's an average movie from a storytelling perspective, but it has some above average moments in it that are worth checking out once.
Yeah, I'm a little more positive. I'm going to go with 3.5 stars. I think that the other thing that kind of puts it over the edge for me is the De Niro Bernthal relationship. I like how they played off each other, and I was invested in that relationship. I wish I could remember how much I gave Here Comes the Boom, because if somebody asked me like to compare it to anything, I'd be like, it's kind of like Here Comes the Boom. Well, it's like tone wise, Here Comes the Boom had that similar thing where it has a lot of silly stuff, but it also kind of was emotional at times. Mm-hmm. So I would say if you like that one, you would like this one, and vice versa. I don't think you would say that, because from what I remember, you liked Here Comes the Boom a lot more than what it sounds like. It was better than a C for you.
Yeah, I've rewatched Here Comes the Boom recently, and it is good. I think that's a fair comparison. My immediate argument would be there's no performance that's as good in this as Henry Winkler in Here Comes the Boom. that would be my immediate go-to, but that's a really fair comparison, and I think I would recommend them kind of in the same vein. Obviously, one of them makes MMA look a bit more credible than the other one, but God, that shit was hilarious. That is going to wrap up Grudge Match, our little 3-piece in a soda here with De Niro and Stallone. We appreciate them taking the time to spend with us here on the Contrarians. Up next, we had mentioned earlier in the Contrarians Corner, The screenplay writer of this movie, Rodney Rothman, is coming right back into the fold with Spider-Man Into the Universe.
Into the Spider-Verse.
Whatever.
Also, while we're talking about what's coming up next, I had the pleasure of guesting once again on Beyond the Box Set, that podcast where they make up sequels to movies that don't have sequels. I brought Something Wild to the show. I'm not saying that I brought Something Wild. I'm saying I brought the movie Something Wild to the show. It's a Jonathan Demme road comedy. I don't know if you've heard of it, Alex, but I got the Criterion a while ago and watched it, and I was looking for an excuse to rewatch it. I brought it over to John and Harry, and we had a really good talk about that, and then pitched a couple of, I think, very entertaining sequels to it. So be on the lookout for Beyond the Box Set, the Something Wild episode with yours truly. And then the time has come, Contrarian listeners. The live stream for The Cure is almost upon us. By the time that this episode release will be less than 2 weeks away. And it's time to announce which movie we'll be doing on our segment. And we'll do that after this promo.
My name is Nicholas Haskins, and I'd like a moment of your time to tell you about the 5th annual live stream for The Cure. To do that, I brought along 2 people whom I couldn't do this event without, Gerald Morris and Dan Brennick.
Over the past 4 years, the live stream for The Cure has raised over $30,000 for the Cancer Research Institute.
That contribution is helping to fund research into cancer immunotherapy, training the body's immune system to fight all forms of cancer.
This year, we're aiming for our biggest goal yet as we try to raise $15,000 in 50 hours on the air.
Tune in May 19th through the 23rd as we're joined live by podcasters and content creators from around the world.
With your help, we can continue the fight for a future immune to cancer.
Together, we can make a difference.
So, Livestream for The Cure 2021 edition. It starts on Wednesday, May 19th, runs all the way to Sunday, May 23rd. The Contrarians will be on Saturday, May 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the poll was won by one M. Night Shyamalan. And we have decided that the movie we're going to do on our segment is The Happening. Alex, you've seen The Happening, right?
I saw The Happening in theaters, my friend.
I believe I did as well. It's been a while, but that movie stays with you. If any of you haven't seen The Happening yet, well, you have a couple weeks to watch it, so you're ready when we get on the live stream. We'll be doing our thing just on a shortened format because we have an hour on our segment. So we're gonna. The good thing is, if you've seen The Happening, you know not a whole lot of plot, so we should be able
not much going on there at all.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like the people listening, how surprised they were. I mean, I know Shyamalan has like a embarrassment of riches of rotten films to choose from, but I would guess this is where a lot of people thought we were going. So I hope we're able to live up to it.
Yeah, mark it from the 19th to the 23rd, and our segment is on the 22nd, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And now, Alex, we can go to Perennial plugs.
Let's do. And let's start off by giving a thanks to the Festive Years who provide our opening and closing tracks. They kick us off with Last Stand and take us home with Summer of 99. Be sure to head over to thefestiveyears.com for any and all Festive Years needs.
Our friend, fellow podcaster Hans Rothgieser, he did our logo. He's done all the graphics on our webpage, on our Patreon, on our upcoming merch. He's a great guy, great artist. You can reach him on Twitter at Mildemonios, that's Mildemonios, or you can email him at mildemonios@hotmail.com, or you can check his website, mildemonios.pe. That's where you can find information about his novels. He has a bunch of fantasy novels, mostly zombie novels. The most recent one is called Almost Zombies. It's an anthology, zombie stories written by different Peruvian authors. The gimmick is that each story takes place in the Peruvian region that the author is from. He also has a couple of podcasts. He has Nación Combi, which is about Peruvian current affairs, and he has Marginal, which is about Peruvian economy, or just economy in general.
And lastly, of course, Zoe Perez, who helps with our social media game. If you aren't already, be sure to head over to Instagram at Contrarian Prime and give us a follow, as well as our Facebook page, facebook.com/Contrarian Prime. Zoe helps curate our Instagram account, make our graphics, our pictures, our images, makes everything real pretty in ways that Julio and I could not. So Zoe, as always, much appreciated. And that is going to wrap up Grudge Match. As mentioned, next time we come to you, it will be Into the Spider-Verse, not the universe. Julio's going to have to help walk me through a lot of this, but I'm sure it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. In the meantime, in the interim, that's going to do it here for us on the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong, and we will catch you next time.
But even so, I can't go on.